I have a presentation to share with everybody, and I'm going to start sharing the screen. Now, the thing with this presentation, as I went to find it, is I can only find it in Spanish, which is interesting because I don't remember ever giving this presentation in Spanish. The Urantia book tells us that doing the will of God is nothing more or less than the exhibition of creature willingness to share the inner life with God. So I'm going to tell you some stories that I've got floating around in my mind and hopefully share a piece of that inner life with you. Jesus never used one teaching method, just one teaching method, I suppose I should say. Sometimes he taught directly and sometimes indirectly. Sometimes he trained his apostles to do the teachings in his place. But one method that had the longest lasting effect was the parable. Jesus's parables were passed down from person to person, and many were recorded in the Bible and are well known throughout Western societies today, even by people who've never actually read the Bible. I love Jesus as the storyteller. We are told that truth is dynamic. There it is in Spanish. That truth exists on a higher spiritual level. That you can know the truth and you can live the truth, that you can experience the growth of truth in the soul and enjoy the liberty of its enlightenment in the mind. But you cannot imprison truth in formulas, codes, creeds, or intellectual patterns of human conduct. So how do we communicate these living truths into language without imprisoning it in creeds? The way you do this is you tell a story. So we have good stories to tell. Stories about life and love and faith and courage. History is written by the storytellers, by those who keep the records and make heroes out of men, and they direct all of the glories to God. For a good story, an audience will gather, families will meet, and communities will bond. One good story can unite all people. And as the masses gathered around Jesus to glimpse God through the lens of this master storyteller, the creator, the maker of men and the divine, the masses of people will come and the masses of people will go, and certainly Jesus experienced that. But we can't just tell a story. We must tell a good story, a story about service and love and faith and courage. We can become the joy in other people's lives. We tell stories to help us comprehend the universe and our place in it, to help us discern if we are following our divine motivations or if we are following our animal instincts. There's this work of art, and I love this story, this work of art by Henry Matisse, and it was hung in the New York Museum of Modern Art, and it was hung there upside down. And it stayed this way for a month and a half. 116,000 people saw it before someone noticed and rehung it correctly. And so it's the same way with us and our motivations. Are our motivations coming from our animal natures or from our divine natures? Do we know the difference, or are we upside down? We tell stories because there's things about God that we do not understand. Paper 1 tells us about the universal Father, and it says, quote, as a reality in human spiritual experience, God is not a mystery. But when we attempt to make plain the realities of the spirit worlds to the physical minds of the material order, mystery appears. So in this meeting, we are attempting to examine the relationships between love and joy, between masters and disciples, between teachers and students. It's not this straightforward relationships of a red cup of paint to a blue cup of paint. Our relationship with God is that of a child with a net running around outside trying to capture the fog. It's there. We know it's there. It surrounds us and it lives within us. We just can't quite grasp it. Our comprehension of the fog is not limited by our nets, but by our minds. The Father in heaven is not a destination, but a direction we are drawn to. God is not calling us home. God is directing us to go forth. God's call is a call to action. From the universal Father who inhabits in eternity, there has gone forth one supreme mandate: be you perfect, even as I am perfect. Now, this does not mean being a perfect teacher, a perfect leader, a perfect parent. This is not what I would call outward perfection, but a mastery of your inner will, perfection of personality, motivation, and God consciousness. In other words, not my will, but your will be done. So let's dive into this mystery a bit. And this should be particularly thrilling to all of you thrill-seeking Urantia book readers out there, because we're told in paper 105 that there are many elements of danger attendant to the presentation of the mortal intellect to the idea of the infinite I am, since this concept is so remote to human experiential understanding that it involves serious distortion of meaning and misconception of values. This is what I like. Where can we go wrong when we have those things? When they say this, they're going to tell us a good story. So there's this thing that exists, except it doesn't exist, only it kind of does, or at least it did, only it definitely never actually did exist, and it's called the I am. The I am is this philosophical concession that the authors of the Urantia book have agreed to make in order to allow our materially limited minds to grasp the Trinity. We mortals, we like sequences, a series of cause and events and effects that could potentially reach all the way back to the universal Father, the first cause. But, the universal Father created the eternal Son, and simultaneously they created the infinite Spirit. But us clever mortals were always asking things like, yeah, but what was it like before that? And that's where the I am comes into play. There never really was a before that, but because there was no cause and no effect in this time, or even no time in this time, but there is reverberating out there in the members of the Trinity some residual echoes of the time before time. So to give us mental ease, the authors of the Urantia book have allowed for the concept of the I am. Deity before first cause. Through inherent free will and eternal free will, the I am escaped unqualified infinity. In one action, deity became the Father to the Son, and with that appeared the infinite Spirit. From the safety of our Zoom rooms, this actually kind of does make sense. Because one thing cannot exist by itself, because things are defined not just by what they are, but by what they are not. If we were to squish everything in the universe down into the size and mass of a coffee cup, you still have two things: everything that is that coffee cup and everything that is not, the empty space around it that helps define the shape of that cup. Big Bang theorists will tell you that they really can't say exactly what happened during the Big Bang or before the Big Bang, because until there were two things to talk about, the laws of physics don't apply. Reality breaks down. It's the same thing with the Urantia book. Before there was the first action, they can't really tell you what it was like. So you can't just have one thing, you have to have two. But in reality, you need three. So you've got the coffee cup, and then you've got all of the empty space that defines that coffee cup. That's thing one and thing two. Or you could think of it like a painting. You've got a wall-sized canvas painted in unflawed white with a green dot in the middle. And this painting doesn't just have one thing, the green dot, but it's also got this second thing. And that's all the white expanse that is not the green dot. Two things. But it also has this third thing, which is the relationship between the green dot and the white expanse. That third thing, that's the art, the relationship between one and two. Three things. So it's the same thing with the Trinity. You have the Father, who is defined by removing himself from the Son, and then concurrently the third source and center is created. the infinite spirit, the conjoint actor, the divine relationship between Father and Son. What's the first commandment given from the first source and center to the second and third? Be you perfect in your spheres, even as I am in mine. And they are. They are all equally perfect. We're told that God is love, the Son is mercy, and Spirit is ministry. But none of these things actually happened this way. This is just a story that they're telling us, rooted in truth, to help us understand things just a little. The universe was started by a free will action and a mandate to be perfect. The entire history of the universe of universes is an examination of this first idea, free will action toward perfection. I'd like to stop there for just a second and get some comments and responses. So do you have any comments or responses to this presentation so far on this idea of being a storyteller and the stories we can tell that are rooted in the Urantia book, and maybe particularly my green dot coffee cup?
Yeah, you were talking earlier about the I am, okay, and God. The Universal Father, okay, and we have been doing this study, and our facilitator, Roger Paul, has been the sevenfold. The Universal Father is thought. He is the I am. Now, if you go to and examine Rene Descartes in 1637, he came up with this saying, cogito est sum, okay? That means I think, therefore I am. And so God, the Universal Father, he is thought. The Eternal Son is word, okay? And then the third part of the Trinity is the infinite spirit, which is the conjoint actor, which takes thought and word and turns it into action. And then the whole universe needs all of these different things to, come and exist. And even us in our bodies, we are examples of, it says in the Bible, we are made in God's image. Well, God's image is, we have thought, and thought comes into words, and then words go into action. Okay, and then we we have the thoughts, and then we make them into words so that we can share these thoughts, and then we turn it into action where we can facilitate making all of these thoughts come into play.
I think that's great.
And I thought that that would be an apt thing for to share with the group as the I am and the Trinity comes all together in God, and how we are in God's image through all of these different things. We think, we turn those thoughts into words, and then we turn those thoughts and words into action.
Chris, Stuart has his hand up.
Stuart.
Yeah, Chris, first, couple of things. One, I applaud you, brother, with your bravery to come in without preparation. You're like a stand-in Broadway for a key part that you have to now, because the actor who was there could not be there, you have to step in. You did it. Now, not only did you did it, but I mean, we have only interacted on a few times, but the times I did not realize the depth of how far down into the hole of the rabbit hole of Alice in Wonderland that you have gone into the existential concepts of this revelation. Holy cow, bro. You and I need to get on a desert island for at least a couple of weeks with enough provisions, or we can just get it all out and we'll figure it out, okay? Listen,
Yeah.
that was listen, I didn't realize it, but I want to share that with you. I feel
you.
that
Well, thank you, Stuart. When you were talking about Rene Descartes, there's a, so, I mean, the point of this presentation is that we all need to be developing stories, right? And then I've got another story to tell you here in a bit, and this isn't that story. But another story that I like to tell is about faith and how, you know, you can take a number, divide it by 2 and divide it by 2 and divide it by 2 and divide it by 2, but you never reach 0, right? That leap from nothing into something is a leap that you have to take, and it is a leap of faith. And that's the same thing with us humans and our relationship with God. And that you can read all the religious materials you want to read, and you can study the Urantia book as much as you want to study it, but you have to take this leap between not having a relationship with God and having a relationship with God. And so the way I describe that leap that I had to take myself is through Descartes. Because just as Descartes in his meditations talks about, you know, sitting in his chair and he's stripping away every layer that he can't say for sure that he can depend upon. He's taking away his senses and he's taking away the outside world and he's getting down to his mind and he comes to, I think, therefore I am. I went through a similar experience, you know, again, I'm in college and I'm reading Descartes. To try to do that with myself. And when I got down to the core of what I couldn't strip away anymore, I found relationship. And I don't know what that relationship is or was, but it's basically what I've been examining ever since, trying to come to an understanding of what that relationship is. So it's the same process Rene Descartes went through. It's just I came to a different conclusion, but I, just like Descartes, am now spending my life trying to figure these things out. So Bennett, you have a comment.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Drifting back into the at no time eternity moment, I was contemplating things like you guys have been describing, and one of them was I arrived at the point where I believed that there couldn't be nothing, therefore there had to be something. That, in other words, the universe was inevitable. And probably not more than a few months after that, I read in the book where the universe is not inevitable. And I'll leave that one hanging, except to say that the Trinity was, in fact, once everything is, the Trinity was inevitable. Now, the other thing is going back into your story, Chris, that the way we live as families, we have kids and we have a home and we work, et cetera, et cetera. We're following a pattern that exists in eternity, because when the Father gave birth in that theoretical moment to the eternal Son, paradise sprang into existence. So there was a family and now there's a home at the same time. There was no need for that in that hypothetical moment before. And with the creation of the infinite spirit, the central universe of Amona sprang into existence, the place of ministry, the initial theater of ministry. That is all.
I learned that the Son helped the Father to overcome the limitations of infinity. And that was in the prehistory of creation, when there were no written records. So when the infinite spirit came into existence, then Havana became a reality. And later on, in the meeting of the Trinity, they decided to create time space so as to have the challenge of building perfection out of imperfection. This is in the 7 trillion years or millennia, until the first time that grandfather went and reached paradise. Then we are in this great challenge, trying to reach the perfection the Father invites us to cultivate and to try to reach. And I think that our sphere, our planet, is reaching a level of maturity that will take us safely and securely to light and life. And we are very privileged to be the pioneers in this movement. If we unify the Urantian movement and assemble well-intentioned people with goodwill, good faith, good sense around the Urantia book, we will certainly find the points in common that will bring us unity and brotherhood and sisterhood in this world. This is beautiful to be in this meeting when we are connected by the internet, the same way we are connected in our divine monitors to the Father and to each other. This is very beautiful to assist. Thank you for the opportunity of attending this meeting.
Hi, nice to meet you, Chris. I haven't had the pleasure before. I was so excited to see your little green dot. I've confounded many a meeting with my, usually I use a fork or a pen. The thing, the not thing, and the relationship between them. And if you've got 3, then you've got 7. Right?
Yes.
Okay, we got that one. Or do I tell that story?
Okay, I know how you get from 3 to 7, but you should tell everyone how you have to get from 3 to 7.
Does anybody want me to bore them again? Gary, you want me to bore you? Okay, you got the thing. You got the other thing. And so you got those 3. That's 3 to start with. And then you've got the relationship between the not thing and the thing itself. That's 4. And then you've got the relationship between the interface, what I call the interface, and the not thing. It's 5. And then you've got the relationship between the interface and the thing, which is 6. And then you've got all the relationship between all 3, 7.
7.
And that's how we get 7 super universes and 7 everything, because if you've got one thing, you've got 7. That's how it happens. But I have another story. I love your idea of the stories. This is wonderful. So this story is set in an old barn. And this barn has holes in the roof. And it's daytime. So there's shafts of light that come through the holes in the roof and shine onto patches on the floor. So there's little patches on the floor of this old barn that are illuminated with light. And there's all these little human beings in the dark, shadowed area, not standing in the light, but because they're in the shadow, because they don't understand the light. They don't know what the light's about or where it comes from or anything. And so they're very hesitant and sometimes eager, but not knowing about it, they don't do it. And so they talk about it a lot. So they talk and talk and talk, and they theorize about the light, and they theorize about the dark, and they theorize about movement, and they talk a lot. And then eventually, they run out of talking. And when they run out of talking, there's nothing else to do but step into the light. And when they do, they realize that their journey has just begun, because where they're going is to the source of the sun.
Beautiful. All right, I don't see any more hands up, so I'd like to tell you another story. All right, so this story is going to revolve around John the Baptist. You don't need to look at this picture the whole time, but just know when I think about John the Baptist, this is what I'm thinking of, is, you know, this guy on the screen here. So I hope you all saw that. So the Urantia book tells us that, and this is a quote, pain and suffering are essential to progressive evolution. This is the quote that my wife, Alice, particularly likes reciting at me. She's evolving me, she says. God says that, or God says, Jesus says to a God-knowing kingdom believer, what does it matter if all things earthly crash? The midwayers tell us that temporal securities are vulnerable, but spiritual sureties are impregnable. When the flood tides of human adversity, selfishness, cruelty, hate, malice, and jealousy beat about the mortal soul, you may rest in the assurance that there is one inner bastion, a citadel of the spirit, which is absolutely unassailable. Such spirit-born individuals are so remotivated in life that they can calmly stand by while their fondest ambitions perish and their keenest hopes crash. Perfect beings in your world, being a perfect being in your world does not mean that all of your ambitions will be fulfilled. So this brings us to the story of John the Baptist. John's raised a man with the expectations of greatness. He was to cut a path through the wilderness upon which the Messiah himself would tread. He spent years studying the scriptures, trying to deduce the proper actions to take. And then one day he began preaching, and with the preaching came the baptisms. And he still entertained expectations for the days ahead, but his immediate concern was for the person in front of him in the river. And it was a long line. He gathered followers, he led a movement, he came to the attention of the paranoid authorities. But he was so focused on the baptisms at hand that he did not even recognize that Jesus himself had come to join him until they stood together in the water. And this was it. This is what they had talked about as children. The kingdom was at hand. Jesus submitted himself for baptism, and then came the voice of God, and then suspense just filled the air. And then Jesus, without saying a word, he turned around and walked away and is not heard of again for 40 days. How did John respond? The next day he went back to baptizing. Weeks later, Jesus reappeared. He came to camp for a day or two. He spoke to a few folks. He stole a couple of apostles, and then he walked away. John's response was the next day he went back to baptizing. And this is it for John. That's the end of John's story. 6 months later, he'll be in jail. 2 years later, he will be dead. Any expectations he had for himself and Jesus were not destined to come on this world. But John was able to focus on the task at hand. Today we baptize, tomorrow will take care of itself. What does it matter if all things earthly crash? The last paragraph of one of the papers on the universe-mother spirit, it says, in every dark hour, at every crossroads in the forward struggle, the spirit of truth will always speak saying, this is the way. And Jesus said that the evidence to all the world that you have been born in the spirit is that you sincerely love one another. John was able to focus on the work at hand, and it didn't matter if all things earthly crashed about him. because he was guided by the Spirit saying, this is the way. And he was able to sincerely show that he was born in the Spirit, not by his great works or the great acclaim that was thrust upon him, but because he sincerely loved the person in front of him in the river. So that's my story about John the Baptist. It's not my story, of course, but that's the story of John the Baptist that I love the most from the Urantia book. Comments or questions from the gallery? I see Gary.
Hi, Chris. I thought I'd say something. It was deathly silence, and I'm always nervous with silences. I obviously love what you just said. It's something I try to work towards myself. I think when you're doing work like all of us here on this study right now are doing, working towards a revelation that is at this moment significantly beyond the aggregate of this world, that it's to work in the knowledge that your efforts will come to what you would consider to be not a great deal of immediate success or even success in your lifetime at all. But that is something that helped actually start to galvanize me more now. It's freed me from the expectation of success. It's and that's quite emancipating. And that emancipation allows me to be more dynamic and to give myself to projects and ideas that don't have any real indication of material success, but I know in my heart have value. And I think John probably knew that too, that he knew he was establishing something at the time, that he was a solid brick in the foundation of something very significant. And I think he did that work with that sort of sincerity and knowledge, knowing that was what was going to be the result. His faith showed him that. And I think that we can do the same thing. I don't expect anything that we're doing here, anyone in this study, for instance, to be having some sweeping effect on this world. But I do expect that the work we do today and tomorrow and for the rest of our lives will have a unending effect on this world in the fullness of time. And that's the reason that why I adore Jesus' actions, John's actions. Anyone who sincerely works towards progress on this world cares about progress, not the apparent veneer of success towards progress. Yeah, that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you very much. There's something that lives within the story of John. It leads into, frankly, another whole hour's examination into the nature of love, because as that quote at the end with Jesus about how we can, we truly show is that we love one another, right? And that's how we know that we're born of the Spirit. And yet, what is love then? And love is a service to one another, and that John provided such a great service. And so it really, in my mind, brings that, I mean, how these two stories that we're talking about so far, about John and about the idea of the I am come together, in my mind at least, is that notion that the Father in heaven is not a destination, but a direction we are drawn to, right? And love is this expression of this direction. It's not just a feeling that we have, but it's this urge that we have to do good for one another, right? It is a drawing out to go forward. And it's the same thing with the I am, this idea of, or this first cause of be you perfect even as I am perfect, or of, I don't even know how to, I said it really well earlier today, that that the entire universe is this examination of this idea of free will action toward perfection, right? And so it's the same thing with love. It's this free will action, this free will urge we have toward doing well to others, toward perfection. And so those two stories really draw me, and I'd like to let Stuart go, and then if we have time later, I'll tell a third story, but maybe not, who knows?
Chris, if I can say, John, of the four Gospels, I mean, we all sit with this fifth ethical revelation to this world upon the foundations 2,000 years ago of the beginning of Christianity, the foundation of that faith. And John, of all of the apostles, was the only one who lived, I think that they theorize into his 90s. And he was the one that Jesus said, take care of my family. Make sure that my legacy in them is watched over. He stayed around. He did not leave the premises. He is the bridge between the church fathers of the emerging church and the apostolic foundation. He talked about, if you look at the letters of John, they're always focused, after all the theology his gospel says, it's always focused on love. And he tells everybody, love one another. That's his, in my opinion, John, with all the divinity revelation in his gospel on the risen Christ that he offered, his heart in his age to a level I hope I can reach, was powerful in love. So I just wanted to say, when you say John to me is truly that bridge by which all the traditions of his brothers, of the apostles of Christ, funneled through him into the next generation like a baton in a relay race, and just handing it over and saying, this is what we've got. It's the best of it. Take care of it.
I often wonder what the revelators were thinking giving us the Urantia book. It makes almost no sense to entrust such a revelation with us lowly people. I guess the other option is they gave us, Jesus, and you saw what we did to him. And so at least a book is a little safer for the people involved. But, it's really that idea of, okay, here it is. Here it all is written out on, in a book, and we're handing it off to you guys. And now we're just saying, do what you can, try to bring this forward. Think of this as a 1,000-year mission. Here's the book, now get started, as opposed to think of this as something you have to get done by 1975. The world needs to be changed. And I think it has really, influenced our community. I hope it has. The idea that we can take this book and go a little slow with it, that we don't have to hit everyone over the head with the book. And, now we'd be dropping them from drones right on everyone's porch. We don't have to do that right now. We can just try to utilize this person-to-person method that's evolving, because now person-to-person means person to screen, and screen to camera and camera to person, methods. But we can try to incorporate the teachings into society so that we can better society. There's this I don't know, there's another story I'd like to tell about Oh, I guess it's more or less about family, but I'd like to hold off for a second because I want to hear what Perry and then Bill have to say first, and then then I will or will not tell the family story.
I just want to go back to your I am. And the coolest thing about it is that when you say it, it means I am. And this is the affirmation of being. And there's no separation, truly. God is with us, but not more than with us. God is us. I am.
Bill?
Okay, yes, thank you, Chris. I'd just like to say that, I'd love to share the teachings of the Urantia book. And believe me, I have tried to do that. But when you run against organized, fossilized religion, they don't want to look in any book other than what, if it ain't in the Bible, then they don't want to see it. They don't want to hear it. And you can't tell them that even the Bible doesn't say, oh, okay. Even the Bible doesn't say that the Bible is the whole thing about God and Jesus. Matter of fact, John 21:25 says it was all the stories that were written about Jesus, wherever collected, they would not even fit on this world. And that's true. And, and God says many times in the Bible, my thoughts are higher than your thoughts and my ways are higher than your ways. And, but you try to expand people's horizons and you like run up against a block wall and you can't get past that. And that's the saddest thing that people really, they want to know about God, but then they don't want to know about God. How do you get past that?
I have no good way of getting past the idea that people throw up roadblocks. And the only, look, everything I'm about to say, I say as a theory because it's never actually worked. But when you talk about your own personal experience, when you say, this is my relationship with God, this is my understanding with God, you're not then saying this book is better than that book, this church is better than that church. It's here is me and here's God and here's what I know about God. Tell me about you and what you know about God and let's compare.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one way I think we can get past, the
right. And you say, why do people really want to study the Bible? Okay. And the no answer is they want to learn more about God and Jesus. And well, then you offer to teach them or show them something that God has given us and that he even predicted in his book in the Bible, Daniel 12, verse 4, that he would give us something. And that's when it came in the 1930s, when that book was given to us. That's when people really started traveling all over the world in airplanes and seeking knowledge. And that is exactly what was predicted in the Bible. And that's the time that this book came to us. And but, the people religions of the world are skewed by a couple of ungodly verses and revelations, and they're kept in relative darkness. And that's sad. And you try to get through that. And you try to share this wonderful gift that God has given us. And it, you know, like, you know, they rather stay in the darkness. Revelation 6:15 and 16 explains it.
All right, we're almost out of time. I want to give Bennett, and then I saw another hand go up. Bennett and Cecilia, the last two words. Bennett.
Well, really appreciating, Chris, what you said in response to Bill. And I would like also to throw a few thoughts out there. One is that we go into these things sometimes thinking we can contend with people, or that somehow our point of view is against their point of view, or their point of view is against our point of view. And it's not a good place to start. I used to base my success in communication, painfully so, on whether somebody actually listened to me and did what I said on demand. I was wrong every time I did it. I would be wrong today if I did it. And I will say this to you in a slightly different way, and I mean no offense by it, but just to show you where I'm coming from, I'm suggesting not to contend with these people, but do tell them your piece, as Chris suggested. And remembering that Jesus said, don't try to take something out of somebody. It doesn't work. Put something in to them that's worthwhile, and the Spirit will do his own work. But from my perspective, if I demand satisfaction and base my success on my own satisfaction, I'm immediately wrong. All I can do is put it out there and leave, and really not care whether they ever pay one bit of mind to what I said. Give it to them in full trust and walk away. Let go of it completely and walk away. And go easy on yourself.
All right, Cecilia.
Thank you.
Well, Bill, I was going to share my story, one of my little stories. And that was when I first found the Urantia book, I shared it with some aspects of it with my sister, and she thought that I had found a book of the devil, and she was a born-again Christian, and and I thought, well, this didn't get me anywhere. It just threw up a wall between us. And so as time goes on, we, spend time together. A couple of times we actually helped our sister moved into care, and which was not an easy thing to do. And there were a few times where we didn't even know what was the solution to our difficulties. And so she knew I believed in God, and I believed in Jesus, and that was the most we shared. But when things got really tough with the move, I would suggest we pray together. And I felt totally comfortable praying with her, because that's the level at which we agreed. We were in unity about our love for God, and we could pray together. And it felt very powerful to do that with her. And at one point after, not too long after that, I don't think, I was trying to get on the general council, and she had just married a man, and I was going to go visit her at their cabin, and she was waiting for me, and I'm filling out the application for the general council for the fellowship. And she, like I said, she used to think that I was of the devil reading this book, and which I've heard stories of other people thinking that. And she says, what's going on? Why aren't you here? And I said, well, I'm trying to fill out this application. And she said, well, hurry up, And so when I got there, she said, Well, I shared with them, they said, well, what's taking so long? I shared with them about this book and this organization that you're involved with. And their immediate reaction was, I was of the devil. But
I know where you're coming from.
yeah, so, but the fascinating thing, Bill, was she was standing up for me. She said, no, it's not of the devil. They believe in God and they believe in Jesus. And she was standing up for my belief system, even though she didn't agree or embrace it. I thought that was the most powerful thing, but I'm talking about 40 years of this happening. It wasn't fast. And so we respect each other's belief systems. We'll pray together. We love each other. I think even though it took 40 years, I think we've made progress. And that's the watchword, isn't it, of this book, is progress. That's the end of my story. Amen.
What a great place to leave this off. Thank you, everybody. Hey, these Urantiathons, we make them together. We're all in these together. So thank you all for coming and participating. It's been a great hour. And I know our next couple hours will be great because I see the leaders here.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Chris, for stepping in.